Hello, everyone, and welcome to the ninth ever Highlight Haven interview. My name is Matthew Heiserman, and today we are joined by a very special guest. He is the voice of the Boston Celtics. Let me welcome Sean Grande to the show. It's great to have you on.
It's a pleasure to be here. I mean, I wish I could have been like a milestone one, like number 10, but number 9 is pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get right into it. During this year's Olympics in Paris, you were able to do play by play for boxing. Can you explain what it was like, especially saying that that might not be the sport that you're most comfortable or familiar broadcasting?
Well, it's an interesting question because obviously the boxing at this year's Olympics took a very unusual turn, and it became one of the stories that sort of dominated a very feel good Olympics about this very controversial issue. But to me, the art of play by play is being able to do, and I'm biased. There are a lot of guys that just and women that just do one sport and they do it very well and they're great. But to me, the art of it has always been the ability to tell the story of whatever sport you're calling. So the challenge of jumping into MMA 10 years ago or doing boxing now or trying different things or being able to do a hockey game on TV one day and a radio game on for baseball the next day. That to me is the art of it. So when they called and asked me to do the Olympics, it was cool to do the Olympics anyway, and then to do a sport which I haven't done a ton. I've done a little bit, but also has a great history in the Olympics too. I was how could I say no to that?
Yeah, absolutely. At this point in your career, you've called over 2,000 Celtics games, whether it's on TV or through the radio. While it's the same team and the same sport, how are you able to make each broadcast unique and different from the rest?
Well, the games make it unique. If you tell the story properly, they're like snowflakes. Every game is a little bit different. There's a lot of things about every NBA game that are similar, but the beauty of it is when you go to the ballpark every night, you don't know, is this the night Jason Tatum scores 50? Is this the night the Celtics come from 30 points down to win? Is this the night LeBron gets his 25,000? There's always things that can happen, and that's the beauty of it, is that we're telling a story in real time. Again, that's the art of it, is that you're not writing a story the next day. You're not writing about it in a book. You're not telling the story in a 30 for 30. You have to do it live as it's happening, and that's the excitement of it. So there's never a time when you're in the wrong profession if you wake up in the morning and you think, oh man, I got to go call that game tonight. Oh man, I hate going to work. It can't be that way. You got to be excited, not just for doing the job you're doing, but because you have no earthly idea how it's going to end.
Yeah, and you made your national broadcasting debut at just 28 years old. Since then, you've been broadcasting for over 25 years. How would you describe the growth that you've had as a broadcaster from when you started to where you are now?
That's a great question. I think that you don't know what you don't know. When you're in your mid late 20s, to me it felt like, man, I've been doing this for a long time. I've been doing this, for as long as I can remember. I wanted to be a broadcaster, and now how am I going to get in the NBA? And I made it to the NBA at whatever age that was, 20, 26, 27. But even then it felt like I had been waiting a while because you have no perspective on real life because you want to do what's next and you want to do a good job. I think when you the ability to live a life that and become a dad and get married and have the things that happen to you in your life, I think makes you a better storyteller as time goes by because you not only have the experience of having done thousands of games before. And there's a book, somebody wrote a book once that said you can't master anything until you do it 1,000 times, which I guess could be true in a lot of ways. That to really become an expert at something, it takes repetition and over and over and over and over again to do it. But I think, I'm a different person now than I was 20 something years ago when I started in the NBA. And hopefully you're a smarter person and a more learned person and have the ability to tell better stories and perspectivize, a word I'm inventing right now. So calling the 2024 championship, you can tell it better if you've got the historical perspective of not only the history of the team, but also being the one who called the 2008 championship and all the years in between. It gives you a better perspective to be able to tell stories.
Yeah, and when you do your broadcast, it's with your co host and former NBA player Cedric Maxwell. You guys are obviously great on air together. What was it like building up that connection over the years to get it to the point that it's at today?
We had it right away. And I knew it when he called me because I was doing television in Minnesota in 2001 when he was. And they had offered me the job, and I kind of said, no, I'm good. I'm doing TV. I'm in Minnesota. I'm happy. I was at ABC doing college football at the time. There was no reason for me to make any major changes. And it was so I turned the job down twice. And when Cedric Maxwell called me, I thought this could be something where the best case for any broadcast team and any team in general is if the sum of the parts is greater, then when the 2 + 2 = 5, then you got something. And I thought this could be the kind of team you want to have with a team year to year. And that means you want two people together who you want to listen to and share the game with, even if the game isn't fun, even if it's a blowout game, even if the team's lost 4 in a row. You don't mind hanging out with these two people because they're, these are your guys that you've been with for years and years. And I just thought, knowing him, and we had worked together a little bit on the radio station in Boston before that, and I just thought this could be a opposites attract, two jigsaw puzzle pieces fitting. And I don't think either one of us knew it would be the longest relationship that either one of us has ever had in our lives, but it's worked out pretty well.
Yeah, now let's say that you last minute get a call to cover a different game. Maybe it's not with Cedric Maxwell, it's a different broadcaster. How are you able to quickly build up that same connection to make sure that you still do good in the booth?
Well, it's funny. Here's why that's a really interesting question, because you have to prepare for. I'll give you a great example. I'll give you a real time example. I just came back from the Olympics a couple of weeks ago, and I did boxing with Michaela Mayer, who's a world champion fighter. She's fighting for the world title next month at Madison Square Garden, and I had never met Michaela. So when you have a new part, in addition to preparing to call the fights, you think of yourself as a play-by-play guy. I have to learn the teams. I have to learn the sport. I have to learn the fighters. I have to learn, and of course you do. Preparation is everything. You can't have a great broadcast. You can't have a good broadcast if you're not well prepared. You can't have a bad broadcast if you are extraordinarily well prepared. I've always believed that. But I also watched some of the fights that Michaela called because I wanted to hear her as an analyst. What does she like to say? What are the things that appeal to her? Listen to podcasts that she's done. I called and talked to her regular partner at ESPN because that's part of the job when you have a new partner. Sometimes you just get thrown in, you don't have time to do that, and you just, you make do and you have a conversation with somebody. It depends what sport is it. Am I doing TV or radio? All these things play in because television is an analyst medium. Radio is a play-by-play guy's medium as far as who's leading the dance. But it's an important point that I don't think people bring up enough, is that you want to prepare, and maybe I'm the only one that does it. I don't think I am, but I've never heard anybody else talk about it, that if you have a new analyst, prepare for that as well.
Yeah, and of course, with the amount of time that you've spent broadcasting, you've made countless incredible calls. With that being said, is there one call that you've made that really stands out to you as your favorite or most memorable?
I think when I told Max during the last game this year that if he gets the ball, to keep it to himself, because 16 years earlier he didn't, and that's why the famous call of the Celtics winning in 2008 was I got the ball, because Max was out on the court and the ball landed in his hands. I get asked that a lot. I don't know, because you're trying to document it in real time. I really feel like if something is a good call or a bad call or a great call that's for everybody but me to decide. That's for history to decide. I'm trying to do in real time. You have an idea. I mean, I really felt all year the Celtics were going to win, so I had an idea of how it was going to end. And you want to have an idea and be prepared, but you also don't know, how does the game end? Did the Celtics win the championship on a buzzer beater by Jason Tatum, or is it a game that they're up by 25 going to the fourth quarter and there's not going to be suspense and there's going to be a slow buildup as the clock winds down? So all that stuff plays in. But I would say the last person to ask about what was a good call or what was a bad call, or was this a great call or not, I'm the last one to ask, because I'm just trying to do it in real time. It's kind of like saying, I'm waiting for the ball to come to me in the corner, and hopefully I make the shot. And that's my job. My job is to be in the corner, wait for the ball, be in the right spot, get away from my defender, stand where I need to stand, know how much time is left on the clock, and when the ball comes, catch it, shoot it, and make the shot. And you don't think about if that was your greatest shot or not. You just think, well, I was just ready to make the shot because that was my job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and obviously the Celtics just came off their 2024 championship title, and you got to cover the entire journey to get to that point. What was your favorite Celtics moment of this past postseason?
You know what? So it's funny. I've been asked that a lot, and I think it's interesting because there were, in some ways, more memorable moments in the previous seasons because the Celtics had so much drama. It was such a contrast, and I said this in the ramp up to it. I remember preparing people as early as January, February, like, what if the Celtics not only win, but what if they win easily? And nobody wanted to hear it at that time. I was like, what if there is no Game 6 or Game 7? What if they do what teams that dominate the way they dominate do in the playoffs and win easily, which is exactly what happened. And there wasn't that. You could argue Game 1 against Indiana was the signature moment, but I think the way they played together throughout the course of the year, and in many ways, the signature of this team was how badly they bludgeoned teams throughout the course of the year. Beating Golden State by 50, taking all these crazy 30-point leads. They had more. I had crazy. If you like statistical things that support the broadcast, that's a lot of the stuff that I do. And I saw things I had never seen before. This team took more 30-point leads than they had 10-point deficits. That's insanity when you think about how historically good and historically dominant they were. So the team, to me, it wasn't about a signature moment. It was a signature season of just sort of gracefully beating people to death.
Yeah, very dominant season for the Celtics, of course. And this past finals gave the Celtics their 18th franchise championship, which is the most in NBA history. What was it like being able to make that final call in Game 5, knowing that that moment would forever go down in history?
Well, you want to do it right. And that's why I say you don't want to over prepare. I know a lot of young announcers do it. I know announcers in general do it because they think of that moment, but you can't detach yourself from the game. Now, I've called 2 Celtics championships, and they were both identical in the fact that the games were over at halftime. Like there was no this day, in 2024, a 20-point lead can obviously evaporate, but for the most part, there wasn't drama in those games. If the 2008 call, which everybody remembers, hey, did you know what you were going to say? The biggest surprise result I've had in any game I've ever done is that the Celtics lost Game 5 in 2008 in Los Angeles. I was shocked that they lost that game because if you're the Lakers, you don't lose when you're 3-1 down. Don't win Game 5 just so you can fly 3,000 miles to take a beating because it's in that. Obviously, you're trying to win every game, but that's historically why teams tend to lose games at home and lose championships at home. It happens a lot if you look at the record books. But I was shocked that they didn't win. But the call would have been completely different. If they win that game on a Rajon Rondo buzzer beater, everything would have been different. So you can have ideas and themes about, which I did. I knew that in 2008, what I said was it was about the owners naming it Banner 17, naming the company Banner 17, and that was the mission statement. So that was easy. The mission statement is mission accomplished. And then I thought, was there a way to bring that back in 2024? What kind of mission was this? And you realize after the ramp up the last few years, you're just telling the story of this team and being there every day. It was that they came so close over and over and over again. They had to win. They had to win. Everyone told them they had to win. Everyone told them the season would be a failure if they didn't win. So the mission wasn't optional. It was demanded. So that became the mission demanded is mission accomplished. And you realize that so many people will come to the Celtics to talk about all the banners overhead and playing with all those ghosts. And it occurred to me just a couple of days before Game 5, I kept thinking about all those, like, how do you do it? How do you play with that pressure of, Johnny Mike is above me, when I go to work every night and all these championships and all these great players. And it occurred to me that the only way to not be haunted by the ghosts and the legends is to become one. You want to be, instead of being haunted, the only way to not be haunted by the banners over your head and the things over your head is to join them. So because it was a 20-point game and I had the final minute and the Celtics kept missing shots. If you go back and listen to it, I kept waiting for that last signature shot. I think the Celtics missed like their last 6 or 7 shots. And eventually I'm like, okay, we're going home. We're going to the finish here with 30 seconds left because no one's going to make a shot.
Yeah, and just the other day, Kevin Garnett came out with his Eastern Conference power rankings. It went Celtics, Knicks, 76ers, Magic, Cavaliers, and Heat. Of course, Garnett is a Celtics legend, but do you agree with him putting Boston at number 1?
Well, yes, I don't agree, and that's my guy because I was with him in Minnesota and all the years here. But I would, if I was Giannis, I'd like to have a word about that list. If I'm Giannis and Doc and whatever, but I think it's fair. I certainly do. Um, I think it's uh, to have New York as the number 2 team. It's what we all want it to be,
Mhm.
without question. But I am, and you're talking to someone that essentially grew up in Madison Square Garden. So, needless to say, there were a lot of us extremely disappointed that we didn't get that conference final 50 years later. Between the Celtics and the Knicks. My only concern, I just don't want it. I don't want to jinx it. And teams like the Knicks that have this amazing run and this amazing season, like almost every Knick game was like must see last year. They were just a fun team to watch. They were a fun team to root for. I know Celtic fans can't, but for the rest of the league is healthier when the Knicks are good. Historically, teams on a climb up tend to take a step back before they take the step forward. I think they're going to miss Hartenstein a lot. He was a critical part of what they did. I think, listen, there's a lot of people secretly or not secretly hoping that it's New York and Boston at the end, but it is tough. The Knicks are going to have to do what they did last year, and that's a difficult thing to do.
Yeah, and in the NBA recently, we haven't heard the term dynasty quite as much. The last 6 champions have all been different. With that being said, the Celtics re signed Jason Tatum, Drew Holiday, Sam Hauser all over the offseason. Of course, have Jalen Brown to a big contract right now. Do you expect the Celtics to become the next NBA dynasty?
I think if they win again, they'll be what dynasties will be looked back on in the 2050s. We'll look back on the 2020s and say, "Wow, if you won 2 championships in a row, that was pretty amazing, given the restrictions and the salary restrictions, the second apron, and everything about the league is built now to prevent dynasties." And that's why you can't compare the 60s Celtics and the 80s Celtics and '08, the '08 team not getting the second one. That it's just much more difficult to do it right now. All you can do in the NBA is put yourself in position to be around it and then get lucky with health. I mean, people who are maybe didn't appreciate last year's season, the regular season as it was going on, they missed the boat because the Celtics could win the championship this year. But what would truly shock me is if they can match last year's regular season, which they were one of the 5 greatest teams probably in NBA history. That would be I don't expect, especially without Porzingis, for most of the first half of the year. That's just a very difficult thing to do. So if they win again, history can only, like the Patriots dynasty is only going to grow in stature as 10, 20, 30 years go by. And, maybe the Chiefs will be in this conversation here, but because it's so much harder in pro sports to do it, I think what the Patriots did in the Brady Belichick years will stand out even more 50, 60, 70 years from now. The same way there's a reason that you haven't had a repeat champion now in 7 or 8 years in the NBA, and the league is going to make it tough for teams to win 2, 3, 4 in a row.
Yeah, and before we wrap things up, I do have one final question to ask. If there was one piece of advice you could give to an aspiring sports broadcaster like me, what would it be?
Don't say no to anything. Whatever the assignment is, do it. Whenever I speak to large groups, and it depends on where you are, but let's say I'm in Boston speaking to a large group of kids, and I say, how many people in here want to be the voice of the Red Sox? And most of the hands go up. And the point you make is there's only 2 or 3 of those jobs, and in the NFL, there's even fewer because there's only local radio. And who knows where the NBA very much looks at that NFL model where local TV is being phased out. Like you get to do local TV in the NBA, you get to do fewer games. You don't get to do playoff games. So these jobs are becoming few and far between. So the point is that you have to be ready to become the voice of the Calgary Flames or the voice of the New York Liberty and the WNBA. You got to be able to do. It's one of the things about being able to do multiple sports that it's not just, it's a great skill, but it's employment opportunities, so don't say no. That's what I tell people, and prepare because you cannot do a bad broadcast if you are properly prepared.
Yeah, and with that being said, I can't thank you enough for coming on. I really do appreciate it. Is there anything else you want to say to the people watching before we wrap things up?
I would say to you, keep doing what you're doing. And I would say to people that check out things like that, this stuff I would have loved to do a pod. I mean, it's going to sound like ancient history. Kids, we didn't have the internet when I was growing up. That didn't come around until I'm, like basically in college and beyond. So take the technology that's available to you that wasn't available to previous generations and jump in and do things be involved, learn the things that you love. What makes me a lucky person is that I'm able to do for a living what it is I wanted to do when I was your age. The minute I realized reality hit and I wasn't going to play second base for the Mets, I said, okay, how do I get to the major leagues otherwise? And this was the only way I could do it. And I chased a dream. And don't let anybody tell you you can't. Chase it until you can't chase it anymore. That's my advice.
Yeah, really appreciate it. Again, big thanks to Sean Grande for being the ninth ever Highlight Haven guest. And as always, we'll see you next time.